Hi guys, welcome to Cozy Talks Live. That lighting is really bright. I'm gonna tone this down just a little bit. I see a lot of you guys have already been jumping on board and giving me some chat, so I'm really excited about that. For those of you watching the replay, please comment replay. I do like to go back and see any comments and just hear shout outs from around the world because I know that there are people in different time zones that like to watch the show, obviously in their better time zone. So anyways, I know I'm a little bit like, it's been a long day, but let me just start this off night like properly saying cheers and welcome. Look at this, guys. Isn't that the coolest mug ever? I got this at the National Museum of History in DC when I was there in spring break, and my son insisted that I get this coffee mug. And yeah, today was just a day where I needed a coffee mug with a T-Rex and a reacher. All right. Guys, for those of you joining me for the first time, welcome. My name is Cozy Belloso. I'm a physical therapist here in Tampa, Florida. Been a PT now for a little over 23 years. Good heavens, it's a long time. And my passion is working with the amputee and limb loss community. So let's see who is on board tonight because we got a lot of folks on board. And I want us to give a shout out to everybody who is here. We got Chuck coming in from Wyoming with his iced tea. Chuck, you must be having some gorgeous weather right now. Like the whole Midwest area right now is probably amazing in summertime. We got Emily from Central PA, where the weather doesn't know how to behave with her Pepsi Wild Cherry and Cream. Marty coming in from Texas. Don't mess with Texas. They're sipping on some sugar-free Red Bull. We got Frances coming in. There's my fellow Floridian. She's got a Willowwood Alpha Smart Temp TPE gel. I sweat a lot because I'm walking outside in the Florida sun. Girl, don't I know it. I just got it this week, and the witness during the day, I still have to take it off and clean it during the day. Frances, we are going to be talking about liners tonight because we definitely had questions coming in about that. We got Rob coming in from Georgia with his coffee in his cup, and we got Mary Ann with a bud. Cheers to you, Marianne. She says, I talked with my PT student today on FaceTime and he was awesome. Thanks for hooking me up, Cozy. Guys, I do want to say a special thank you. So a few weeks back, I put out a cattle call for one of my colleagues, Donovan Lott. He is one of the professors at the University of Florida. It's actually one of the most prestigious universities here we have in Florida, of Gator fame. So he teaches the up and coming physical therapists of this new generation, and he was looking for volunteers so that his students could interview amputees. And many of you responded to that call. And he actually emailed me this morning expressing his gratitude, and he wanted to say a general thank you to everyone who did that. And guys, I really do appreciate, number one, that you responded to the call, that you took time out of your day to share with the new clinicians coming up the ranks. It really, we spend our years in college and grad school with our noses stuck in the books. And every once in a while, someone has to pull our nose out of the books and show us a little bit of real world and what our future is going to be like. So thank you again to all of you who did that. Kim says, are there options for fluctuation throughout the day? Yes, we are going to be getting to that, Kim. Let's see. Scott says, hello from West Virginia and cold water. Start PT tomorrow. Yay! I'm so excited for you, Scott. Happy 4th of July to everyone. Yes, guys. Happy 4th of July. Let's see. Susan says, Marshall has a front row seat with me tonight. Oh my gosh, Susan, I loved watching the video of you with Align Rehab. I'm going to give a shout out to a couple of my fellow PTs this evening. First is Michelle Jamin up in Align Rehab. And I love the video she posted of you, first of all, rocking it. With learning how to do the steps with your bilateral microprocessor knees. And then second of all, Marshall's like photobomb at the end was just priceless. We've got Eric coming in saying, good evening, Master Liner Makers in the house, drinking Pepsi. Drop mic right there for you, Eric. We've got Kathy on board. We got Bill coming in from Arizona with his ice cold water and brand new jug. Now my water will stay cold for 1 minute instead of 30 seconds. Gotta love Arizona, but it's dry heat. Yes. And I think Arizona, and I would even say Colorado Springs. I was in Colorado Springs last week. Competition for super hot but dry heat. I still say Floridians, man, we get a lot of flack for Florida, but we know how to handle the heat. most of the time. We got Steven coming in from Michigan with his lemon water. Steven, if you don't mind telling me, where in Michigan are you from? We got Jim from Ohio, Freedom Thrifter. Right? That's a very interesting handle. Howard coming in from Central Ohio with some iced tea. Dick Devers. We got a nice crowd this evening, guys. Harsh, there's Harsh. And we've got Mitya. Oh, Mitya, I am so glad that you were able to join in from New Hampshire. Chlorophyll water, too healthy, I know, but fresh stage. To BKOI. Oh, wonderful, Mitya. I am so glad that you are here this evening. We've got Linda coming in from New York and Harsh coming in with his chilled water. Friend, you're not the only one. You're not the only one, Mitya, with the chilled water. And we've got Van Gregory, last but certainly not least, my grasshopper there from Texas with Topo Chico. How very Texan of you, very Tex-Mex of you. All right, guys. So I've had a busy day. I do want to give a shout out. Hey, Tatiana. Well, sorry, it's Andre there this evening. Say hello to your lovely wife as well. So I had a really busy day, but a great day. I had a meeting with a couple of hospitals, and hopefully some things coming down the pike that will happen. If you guys can say a prayer for me for that, I would really appreciate it. And then I also had the chance to be in the hot seat myself. So usually I'm the one putting people in the hot seat on my show. And today the tables were turned. I was able to be on Jackie, the DPT. So some of you may know her on Instagram. She has an online fitness program for amputees. So she coaches amputees online, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. We need more PTs dedicating themselves to amputee care. So I had the chance to be a guest on her show, and it was lovely. It's always so nice to meet. Just connect with another physical therapist who works with amputees and shares that passion, especially someone from the younger generation who is just kind of pushing forward and creating her niche in the community. So thank you again, Jackie. If you're listening, it was an absolute pleasure. Y que se repite, que se repite. All right, let's see. Kosi, Chuck just left to go to a fire. I will ask questions for him. I have questions. Is he a fireman and a paramedic? Oh my goodness. Okay, so yes, please ask the questions. And guys, for whatever reason tonight, my Instagram is just being cranky and it did not want to cooperate. So I say food to you, Instagram. We'll just have fun on Facebook and YouTube. All right, guys, quick Kosi poll. How many of you here are for the first time this evening? And if you're shy about kind of saying me, that's okay. We don't bite. We're actually a pretty chill crew here. I always love to know who are my new faces, new voices here. And also just to remind you, this show is for you. It's for the amputee community, whether you're an amputee or a clinician, family member, or caregiver. I'm here to answer your questions, or at least at the very best, find you the answers if I don't have them myself. All right, let's start off with the liner question that I put the teaser up there for. So Larry texted me and said, how do you go about choosing the right liner, I guess, system? I've been in the pin lock, which I absolutely hate the vacuum. I've had some problems with it. It's more the vacuum pump, went out again, fitting it, trying a new one. But how do you determine what is best for your particular situation? So Chuck is a fireman, wildland fire. Holy cow. Wow. So yeah, Wyoming dry brush fires, I'm imagining, with all the dry heat. Oh, best of luck to him there. Okay, so guys, the reason why, I talk a lot about liners, but in this particular question, I do want to make a distinction, and this is something that people confuse a lot. A lot of times people will confuse the shape of the socket with the suspension system and the liner, okay? So when people are telling me about issues they might be having, they'll sometimes mix up all of those components. And I like to make a distinction because it really does make a difference to determine what's working and what's not working. Okay, so the shape of the socket, it's exactly that. It's how it is shaped to be on your limb. If you're an above the knee, you probably have something called a total contact socket, possibly ischial containment. That's basically talking about how the socket is shaped onto your limb, right? And as we all know, the sockets are customized to every person. No person has the same socket because no person's going to have the same shaped limb, okay? The shape of your socket is different than the suspension system, okay? So the suspension system is what holds the socket onto your limb. Okay, and there's various suspension systems out there. The one that I have here, okay, it's like a little lanyard system. It's the one that Click Medical makes. It's called the Revo Lock, okay? So it twists onto the end of the liner. Hang on, I don't actually happen to have that liner, but I'm just going to kind of pretend that I do. Okay. So it attaches to the end of the liner and then it gets pulled down into the socket. Okay. So that is a suspension system. Okay. And then you have liners. Liners are their own category. Now, does the shape of your socket sometimes contribute to suspension? Yes. Okay. Sometimes the prosthetist will shape the socket in a certain way so that it grabs onto certain parts of your anatomy to help stabilize it. And that does contribute to suspension. Okay. But usually when we're talking about suspension systems, we're talking about things like pin locks. Okay. Lanyards. We're talking about suction suspension where they're using a negative vacuum to get to negative pressure to get the limb to stay on. Okay. When it comes to vacuum pumps, and I've had countless conversations with prosthetists, and every prosthetist, every time I bring up like, is vacuum pump considered a suspension system? You know, some of them will say, yes, it is. Some of them will say, no, you can't bill it that way, and et cetera, or whatever. Okay. So basically, I don't consider vacuum to be a suspension system. I think it should be something almost like a secondary suspension. It should not be considered, in my opinion, primary suspension. Okay. So it's a lot of different, things that you got to kind of piece out. So in Larry's case, he was saying he was having a lot of troubles with a vacuum pump, not working. Guys, when it comes to vacuum, I say in my own practice, I see 50-50. Half the people who use vacuum absolutely love it, couldn't live without it. The other half want nothing to do with it. And it's almost the same with like prosthetists. I feel like it's almost down the line. I see some prosthetists, half prosthetists are like, yeah, I think it's great. I think it's something great to add. The other half prosthetists are just like, ugh, they really don't like vacuum systems. It's kind of divisive, actually. Okay. But if you're one of those people where you're just like, dude, I just don't like vacuum, don't like it, that's fine. There's lots of other options for suspension. Okay. And then Larry is mentioning about pin lock. Okay. So that's what this little guy is. The pin lock is your suspension system. It just so happens that the pin is attached to the liner. Okay. And I think that's what kind of contributes to the confusion that people have about liners versus the suspension system. Okay. And this one in particular, I don't have the strength and I don't have a pair of pliers, but these things twist off. And I'm sure many of you have seen your prosthetist twist it on or twist it off. Okay. So when you twist it off, then you just have the liner. Okay. Not all sockets have this. Okay. This is just simply one method of suspension. Okay. Does that kind of am I kind of like sort of explaining this right? Because I know I'm explaining like several different topics at the same time. So let's just do a quick poll. How many of you have a pin lock liner? How many of you have a pin at the end of your liner that locks into your socket? Let's see. Bill says, I wear custom liners due to the injuries to my residual limb. Earl says, so how is that Revo suspension? I don't like my suction and not liking it always coming out when sitting down. Okay. So the Revo lock, is it this one? Yes. And I really need to ask them. This is my fault that I haven't asked them to send me a liner. So the Revo lock, it's kind of sort of similar to a pin lock. Okay. When I mean similar, I mean that the liner has a little pin that goes on the end of it, a little doohickey pin. I know it's very, very professional there. And then it gets attached to this part. Okay. And then once it's there, and sorry guys, the lighting right now is really bad, so I have to read to see which one it is. Okay. So once it gets attached, then you twist the dial. I don't know if you can see it. And then it draws it in. So it draws in the liner, it draws in your residual limb, and that is one way that you can do suspension. Okay. So Jim has a, let's see. Hey, Glenn. Okay, so Emily has a pin lock. Kathy has a pin lock. Frances says, I love my pin lock. I love hearing it click in. Andre says he's currently a pin, but switching to suction. Linda has a pin lock and a custom ratchet system. Jim from Ohio says, I also have a pin. Chuck has a pin lock. Marianne says, my pin locks do not twist out, locked in. No, and honestly, Marianne, they're not supposed to twist out. That's not like, so once your prosthetist twists it in there, it should stay in there. Sometimes they'll twist out because the prosthetist might put a different length of pin. So for example, if people have a hard time finding that hole, they might put a slightly longer pin to make it easier to stick into that little hole. And Pamela has suction. Okay. And again, I see a lot of times, especially my beginner amputees, that they'll start off with a pin lock or a lanyard system. So that's like a Velcro strap that is also attached to the liner, and you pull it through into your socket to pull yourself into the socket. And then as people progress, some people like Francis, they will stay with that pin lock because they like the security of hearing that click, 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 click. And you know that you're in that socket, and it just gives you that feeling of security that the socket is not just going to go flying off at some point in time. And then with other folks, they feel like the pin lock is kind of holding them back. Okay. And I tend to notice that sometimes, and again, it's kind of a trend, but then I always have exceptions. I tend to notice that the more active people get, the more they want to move towards a suction suspension system. And the wrap with suction suspension it's exactly that. It's kind of suction cupped onto your leg. It's creating negative pressure. So what it does is it gives you a better connection overall with that socket, a more connected feeling to that socket. Okay. So again, pros and cons to each. And really at the end of the day, it's what works best for you in your everyday life. Okay. But again, the liners that you use, I don't want to say it's independent of your suspension system, but it's its own entity. Okay. And there's 3 basic types of liner out there. There's the silicone liners. There's the thermoplastic elastomer. Isn't that fancy? It's also known as the TPE, also known as the gel liner. So you might hear it referred to as any of those 3 names. And then you have the custom polyurethane liners. Okay. I've done quite a few shows on that. You guys can go to my YouTube channel if you want to find something, a little bit more detailed on that. But basically, usually most people will start with a silicone liner. It's probably the most commonly used that I've seen. And a lot of that is because silicone works nicely with most people's skin, doesn't tend to react. In fact, I think that's what this one is right here. I think that's what I have here. When you look at a liner, you can't always necessarily tell what kind it is. But you can kind of sometimes tell by feel. I think this is a silicone liner. It tends to be for more active folks. It's a little bit more streamlined. And then compared to the gel liner, the TPE, thermoplastic elastomer liner, those tend to be what I call the Cadillac ride. They're a little bit more cushy. You'll know if you have a gel liner because when you feel the inside, it feels almost just like a little bit greasy. And the reason for that is because they put a mineral oil on the inside, and that also just kind of helps nourish the skin as well. That tends to be a little bit for my less active folks, or sometimes even my active folks who just want a little bit more cushion. So my buddy Reggie Showers, he is incredibly active and athletic, and sometimes he'll put on a gel liner because he just wants a little bit more comfort in his ride. And then you have the TPE, the polyurethane custom made liners. Those are, like I said, custom made. They tend to be a lot of it more expensive, but they work wonderfully for people who have very sensitive residual limbs that are constantly experiencing skin breakdown, people who have a lot of grafting on their limb, people who have very bony prominences on their limb. And that's because with the polyurethane liner, it kind of shuttles the pressure away from those sensitive areas. Okay. So in this case, Larry, it just sounds like, again, by the way you kind of phrased your question, it sounds like that you were having more of an issue with your suspension system, not necessarily with your liner. Okay. Not necessarily with your liner. So when it comes to talking to your prosthetist, that's what you need to kind of talk through your prosthetist. So it sounds like the vacuum was not a good fit for you. And I'm not sure, again, the way you phrase your question, I'm having a hard time deciphering if you liked the pin lock or if you didn't like the pin lock. But the main ways of suspension would be some form of a pin lock or lanyard, or looking at suction suspension systems. All right, let's see. And then Francis earlier mentioned about She says she has the Willowwood Alpha Smart Temp TPE gel, and I sweat a lot in Florida, and this liner is a lot better. Yes, I've definitely heard a lot of good things about the Smart Temp. It's, I think, blue on the inside, like it's really like a pretty blue on the inside. And at the end of the day, it's a gel liner, right? So they did something to it, so it feels a little bit cooler. And I have had a lot of my Floridians mention that to me, that they do notice a difference in the sweating and in the heat, especially during the summer months. Sorry, there was a question here, guys, that I really just want to scroll to. Bill says, I didn't like the elevated vacuum because of the sleeve wear and tear, but with Sleeve Saver, I love the elevated vacuum. Bill, feel free to go ahead and put your the website down for your Sleeve Saver. So guys, I can't speak enough for Bill. Bill can probably speak on it, but he'll put the website up for his Sleeve Saver, and it helps with the wear and tear of the sleeve. Let's see. There was a question here, guys, that I was just like, ooh. So Mitya says, as a below the knee amputee, I had a pin lock the first year after amputation, but went to suction after that for 18 years. And again, it's a little bit trickier with suction because you have to have a much more close fit. So the prosthetist just has to be really on their game about getting the fit of that socket in there. But I've heard a lot of people are really happy with suction. So Matthew says he's got a one-way valve suspension, so suction suspension with the external sleeve. Earl says, like the contact and feel of suction, but coming disconnected when sitting. So again, that's where you need to talk to your prosthetist, Earl, and just see if you are fluctuating in your limb volume. Because if you're having a lot of fluctuations in limb volume and you're not filling up that space, that's going to create the loss of the suction. Or if there's something going on with the external, like if you have an external sleeve, if there's any problem with the sleeve or it's not fitted correctly against the skin, you're not going to complete that seal there. So again, definitely worth talking to your prosthetist and troubleshooting that. Bill says, have you heard of the new Ottobock Cool liner? Brand new. No, I have not. Tell me more about it. Emily says, I have Winter's gel liner. So that was a liner that was specially created by two amazing men, Kevin Carroll and Dan Strzemka. They were the ones who created and designed Winter the dolphin, her prosthetic tail here in Clearwater Marine Aquarium before she passed away. And yes, they created a specialized gel liner. Guys, can you imagine like the challenge of putting a prosthesis and suspending it to a human residual limb? Can you imagine trying to do that to the residual tail, or what's left of the little tail stump, on a dolphin who has super smooth, wet skin? Like, I can't even begin, right? Kind of crazy. Let's see. Chuck, that's a great question. Does high activity cause gel liners to break down faster? You know, I don't know the answer to that question. If I had to take a wild, educated guess, I would say yes, but I would also say it's not going to be able to keep up with the user as much, if that makes sense. Again, and I'll have to, I like that question. I'm going to go look up the answer to that question, or I'm going to go ask one of my favorite prosthetists that question. But again, with the gel liner, it's a much more cushioned feel. So somebody who is very active, participating in high activity, they need to feel more connected with their socket. So my guess would be is that they're going to feel slightly off their game. Okay, maybe the average person walking around on a day may not notice that it's impeding them in any way, but somebody who's participating in high level activity, or maybe somebody who's walking on uneven terrain a lot, maybe they're going to notice that they don't quite have that connection to the socket. But that'd be interesting to see. Will a gel liner break down faster for someone who's abusing it more compared to a silicone liner? That's a really good question. Can't last longer than 6 months. Yes. Over the end of, you know, usually I think insurance companies typically replace your liners every 6 months or so. And at every time you should be receiving 2 liners, one that's being washed and drying, and one that's being worn. When it comes to the Florida heat, I think Frances mentioned earlier about, even though she had the Smart Temp, she was still having to take off the liner throughout the day. And again, guys, we live in wicked, crazy humidity in Florida summer. Truly, unless you've lived here during the summer, you really have no idea what it's like. It's wickedly humid, and also our temperature, our degrees are easily into the mid 90s, into the high 90s on a regular basis, starting in May and lasting all the way through the beginning of October. It's pretty wicked hot. So sweat is our way of life. And even with these smart temp, these cool liners and things like that, you know, your body is going to sweat. So the best solution I've been able to find for my patients and people who live in Florida is just to take off your liner. There's just, in some ways, there's just no getting around that. So I tell my patients to have like a little spray bottle, half water, half rubbing alcohol, and to have that with them in the car, in a fanny pack with extra socks. And then throughout the day, when you feel that sweat coming on, take everything off, spritz down your residual limb with the alcohol water solution, dry everything off, make sure everything's dry, spritz the inside of your liner, same thing, wipe it dry, put it on, clean socks, and go about your day. So my more experienced amputees, they can do that whole process in under a couple of minutes because they're just used to it. And it really does extend the life of your skin and just your day overall in terms of comfort. Inevitably, whenever I have people who just try to push through the end of their day and they're squishing around in their liner and all sweaty, it's just a hot mess at the end of that day, and their skin breakdown, or just a really, really bad odor coming from the socket. So it's just kind of one of those, if you live in Florida, you just have to accept, especially in summertime, that you may have to take your leg off once or twice a day. So, you know, it's unfortunate, but that's just kind of part of it right there. Let's see. And then in terms of the hygiene of the liner itself, this is also something I'm kind of a stickler about, and I haven't done it in a while, so you guys are going to get the soapbox tonight. The liner needs to be bathed once every 24 hours, as does your residual limb. And I do mean running water and soap. You know, the alcohol spritz bottle, that's just to kind of get you through the day. But once every 24 hours, your limb and your liner need to be put into a bath or a shower and just have everything nice and clean. Notice I'm not saying antibacterial or aggressive, harsh chemicals, okay? Unless you are someone who has specifically been prescribed to use antibacterial by a dermatologist or your infectious disease doctor because you have a history with MRSA or something crazy like that, I usually do not recommend antibacterial for cleansing the liner or cleansing the skin. It kills off a lot of the natural microbiome that lives on our skin that we need. We need that natural microbiome, okay? So one of my favorite things to recommend to my patients, it is the Vital Fit skincare line. Many of you use it. I used to partner with them several years ago. Unfortunately, they've downsized their company a lot so that you don't see them as much on the amputee market. However, their products are still available, and I'm going to throw it up right now. And actually, I had someone today that they were looking for these products and they're like, Kosi, where is it? And I go, well, they've kind of changed things around. But guys, if you type into Google, if you type in Vital Fit SR, just like that, how I wrote it, and you type it into Google, you'll see, I think it's under Resource Essentials is now the name of that company. You'll see it there. And my code still works. I actually tried it today. So here, I'm going to put my code up there so that you guys can get $10 off if you use my code. And I have to actually have to reach out. It's Kosi10, one word, Kosi10, and you get $10 off. So anyways, love these products. Their cleanser is probably what I recommend to my patients the most, and also their liquid to powder lotion. So what I love about the cleanser is very, very gentle on the skin. Very gentle. It does deal with the odors, the sweat, and the bad bacteria, but it doesn't destroy the natural microbiome. These products were designed by a dermatologist, and it's safe to use on your skin and also on your liner. This is the only product line that I found so far that was specifically made for prosthetic users. I see other products out there, like this company might have a soap, this company might have a cleanser and a moisturizer, but this is the only line that I've seen that's comprehensive. And again, love still using it. So guys, we don't want them to stop making this product. So if you don't already have a skincare regimen, highly, highly recommend this stuff. The next thing they have is they have the morning and the nighttime moisturizer. I usually do not recommend putting on anything on your skin before you put your liner on, because it then makes your skin like an oil slick and things go like sliding off, especially in humid weather. This is probably the exception. This is the exception. Their daytime moisturizer soaks in pretty quickly and pretty nicely. That being said, Florida humidity in summertime, usually I'll still tell my patients to hold off or just judge on their own. Like if their skin does not look like it needs moisturizing in the daytime, save it. And I will tell them to use, however, the liquid to powder lotion. Love, love, love this stuff. I use it when I go running. This is fantastic. It doesn't get all like crumbly and gunky and bleh, like some of those other liquid to powder lotions that get all gummy and gross. This one you can continue to layer it on. For my above the knee folks, I like it especially on the top part of their liner where a lot of people get those heat rashes on the upper part of their thigh. Oh, Bill says, dang, Cozy Sleeve Saver is launching a skincare line. Well, I was not aware of that, Bill. So I'm hearing about this now for the first time. So I'm very happy to hear that. And I look forward to hearing more about that. But in the meantime, I'm going to keep recommending this stuff. And then the nighttime moisturizer, love their nighttime moisturizer. And in the nighttime, guys, unless you're wearing a shrinker, some of you still wear shrinkers at night to help manage your limb volume. But if you don't necessarily have to wear your shrinker at night, I recommend just kind of letting your skin breathe at nighttime. And this nighttime moisturizer is just, it's like spa day for your limb right there. Ben Gregory says, I wash the outside of my liner because it picks up an odor as well. Yeah. So guys, when it comes to your liner, again, I just tell my patients, take it in with you to your bath or your shower and wash it on the inside. And yeah, I do recommend washing it out on the outside because it does get, it's going to get all that sweat and it's going to get all that yucky stuff in there. So wash the whole thing and then you hang it to dry. You hang it right side out. Okay. So when you're washing it, you got to turn it inside out, right? And today I'm just all thumbs and I'm not able to do that with this one. There we go. Okay, so when you're washing it, you're washing the inside of it. And then when you're done, dry it this way. And the reason is because when you're drying it, you don't want like the dust particles to start sticking to the inside of your liner. My favorite thing to do is to use a broomstick and just have a broomstick, an old broomstick in your bathroom and just hang it on there. I know they make like really cool like clips that you can kind of clip and then hang it on somewhere. The basic thing is you want it to just be completely dry. And it usually takes about 24 hours for everything to be completely dry, the outside and the inside. So that's why we always have two liners. Cozy 10 is best coat to try. Well, thank you for that, Harsh. I appreciate that. Yes, liquid to powder is the best. Francis says, haven't received the info on the skincare. Francis, what are you referring to, darling? Marianne says, bilateral, the Baca boot camp was handled at the Integrated Care Center. It was wonderful. Marianne, I cannot wait. I cannot wait to someday be invited to that Baca boot camp. If there's anybody from Hanger watching, I am so dropping a not subtle hint right now. You need to invite me to the Baca boot camp. That's all I'm saying. I'm just going to say it out loud. It's going to happen. I'm going to make it happen. All right, guys, let's keep going. Okay. Andre sent in this question saying, hi, I've been using a TENS machine on my limb to try and stave off some of the hypersensitivity. I don't want to use the word neuroma. Okay. So guys, TENS units, it's a particular, oh, Linda says paper towel holder works great. That is a good option too. And it's also a lot smaller. So the TENS unit, it's a type of electrical stimulation unit that is set for pain control. Okay. So way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth and I started practicing as a physical therapist, when you had an electrical stim unit, you had to program it yourself, like the whole thing. And it was something that, I won't lie, it was not my favorite part about physical therapy because as you guys know, I am not a tech savvy person. But then I guess they figured out that a lot of PTs are not very tech savvy like me. And they started making specifically TENS units. So those are electrical stim units that are purely meant for pain relief purposes. So what it basically does is it applies the gate control theory of pain. Okay. And that's like a really, really fancy term for saying we want to distract the brain from any pain that it is experiencing by giving it a different stimulus to focus on, right? So it's like the age old joke. This guy comes in saying, Doc, 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 I've got a huge headache. My head's killing me. What do I do about it? And doc says, aha, I have the very best solution. Doc gets a hammer out and whams him on the thumb. And the guy's like, Doc, doc, my thumb's killing me. And the doc says, yes, but you're not thinking about your headache anymore, are ya? I know. It's an old cheesy joke, but that's basically the gate control theory of pain, is that we are distracting the brain from one stimulus to focus it on the other. So when you're feeling those pins and needles from the electrical stimulation unit, it's bringing your brain and distracting it from any other pain you are potentially feeling. Okay. So in the world of amputee, we use this strategy a lot to try to work with phantom pain. Okay. Now, when Andre is saying that he is experiencing hypersensitivity in his limb and he's hoping it's not a neuroma, this is what makes me go, let's talk a little bit about that, right? First, let's just give a quick overview of the difference between phantom limb pain, phantom limb sensation, and residual limb pain. I have a fantastic YouTube video. If anybody would love to do this for me, I would really appreciate it. If you want to right click and go to my YouTube channel under the 2-minute chat section, I have this fantastic video that explains the difference between phantom limb pain, sensation, and residual limb pain. So with phantom limb sensation, you feel the foot, you feel it moving, you might feel a little pressure, you might even feel a little bit of a tickle, but it doesn't hurt. You just feel it, right? Phantom limb pain, it's exactly that. You're feeling pain where that foot used to be: burning, crushing, tingling, tearing, electrical. You guys have all sorts of adjectives to describe this pain, right? And I've heard all sorts, and it comes in all different flavors. Some people feel it all the time and it's intense. Some people feel it intermittently and it's intense. Some people just have light bursts here and there, all of the things, right? And then there's the residual limb pain. So that's pain that's actually originating from the residual limb that is still there. Okay. And I'm really big on determining what a person has. When someone's telling me I have hypersensitivity, I have pain, I want to distinguish between those three things. Okay. The reason being is because then I can start to figure out, hopefully, what is causing it. Okay, so in this case, Andre is saying something about hypersensitivity in the limb. Okay, and by the way, guys, people who have residual limb pain might be having phantom pain that's being triggered by that. So that's where it gets a little tricky. Is sometimes when people have phantom limb pain, it's actually originating from the residual limb. Okay, so what are some things that can cause a residual limb pain? Neuromas, bone spurs, scar tissue, right? All of these things can cause problems and pain in the residual limb that can then start the phantom limb pain. Okay. So in this case, if he's having hypersensitivity, it could be hypersensitivity from the amputation, right? This is a very common thing to have right after amputation, that, you know, you had your limb removed and what's left there is really sensitive and hot and bothered, right? And it takes time for the skin to get used to touch, for it to get used to having contact, right? And we do desensitization protocols for that. But if this is the person I think it is, then he's been an amputee for quite some time. So I would be surprised that he is still having that level of hypersensitivity, which makes me go, what else is causing that hypersensitivity, right? And again, I'm playing Monday morning quarterback right now. Usually when I feel like someone's having pain in the residual limb, you know, first thing I do is I get my 2 thumbs and I say, point to the pain, and then I stick my thumbs into where they're pointing. I know it sounds really masochistic and I don't like to be mean, but if the person like says, yeah, that's my pain, you just reproduce my pain, then I know that there's something physically right there causing the pain. And then at that point, I ship them off to the doctor because they have these cool ultrasound machines that can then figure out what it is, you know. But if you're putting a TENS unit on there and it's making the hypersensitivity worse, then that's an indication that potentially there might be something there. Okay. It could be that you have the settings wrong on the TENS unit and maybe you have it on too aggressively. But these TENS units that they make nowadays, they make them pretty user friendly. So again, if you're using a TENS unit and the hypersensitivity is actually firing off worse, I would wonder what you got going on in there. Okay. And again, if you do have a neuroma, it's not to say that you can't sometimes use a TENS unit with nerve pain. We use it a lot actually. But that means you also have to adjust where you're placing the electrodes on the TENS unit. And again, this is where you need to take it back to your physical therapist and ask them to take a look and see if there's anything going on. Nobody wants to have a neuroma. I'll give you that much, Andre. But you know, if it looks like a duck, acts like a duck, walks like a duck, you got to get the duck taken care of. And at the very least, get it looked at and just to see why is it that you're having more sensitivity while using the TENS unit. Okay, let's look at some of these comments. I need a sip of my coffee out of my cool, like, I love this mug. Okay. All right. So Marianne says, we're going back next year to the Baka boot camp, so I hope you get to come. I hope so too. Marianne, you need to tell them invite Kosi. How's that? Sounds good, guys. I know Hanger's going to get a bunch of phone calls and be like, why are people asking this? Francis says, what were you just talking about for cleaning thumper BKA? Francis, I think that might be a typo on your part. Can you clarify your question for me, please? Let's see. Harsh says, I use a toilet paper stand to hang my liner on. Jill says, thank you for all that you do for amputees. I learn every week, even after 9 years. Jill, I appreciate you being on board. Thank you. Am I attending Empower Fest this year? No, I am not. I attended last year and I had a wonderful time. Let's see. Yes, the Baka boot camp is in fact for Baka, so for bilateral above the knee amputees. And I think that's the coolest boot camp ever. They take a group of bilateral above the knees and they take them out into the community and they make them work, which I love it because I think one of the scariest parts that I've seen in my patients is getting back out into the community. A lot of folks, they make it to the part where they're, moving around in their home with the prosthesis, they feel confident, but then getting out into the community, that is a Band-Aid that is really tough to rip off sometimes. And as a Baka, even more so. And for valid reasons, there's a lot of things out there in the community that can make you trip and fall, and a lot of scary things like escalators and elevators and stairs and ramps. And you want to be able to live your life and do these things, but you also kind of want to do it in a safe way. So I think the Baka boot camp is just a wonderful way for people to really be able to try all of these things safely with obviously very highly qualified individuals. I know Kevin Carroll goes on many of those excursions, and I think that's just wonderful. Bill says, mine is gut-wrenching. I've been told it's phantom limb pain, but now I'm wondering. And again, guys, phantom limb pain, I've said it before, whoever comes up with the cure is going to be so rich, they're going to have their own island, because we have a lot of theories on phantom limb pain, but we really don't. We're still learning about that. Is it the brain trying to reorganize itself after amputation in a process we call neuroplasticity? Is it the brain just retaining the memories, the last memories of the limb, which could have been pretty traumatic? And again, when it comes to diagnosing the phantom limb pain itself, is it because of the peripheral nerves, meaning the nerves at the end that are firing and firing and firing, or is it coming from the more central motor cortex up in your brain? We do know that sometimes the phantom limb pain is caused by a neuroma, okay? Which we've had some very promising outcomes with people who've had the targeted muscle reinnervation surgery to take care of those neuromas, right? And I actually had the surgeon, one of the two surgeons, Dr. Gregory Demanian, on the show a couple of years back explaining that procedure. And again, when it comes to phantom limb pain, it's even after 23 years of doing this, sometimes I'm sitting there going, what is happening here? What is causing this? but again, it all starts with diagnosing it properly. I think that definitely is the beginning right there. So Bill, and again, I'm playing Monday morning quarterback, but has anybody ever put an ultrasound on your residual limb to see what's going on in there? Do you have any scar tissue adhesions? Do you have a bone spur? Do you have a neuroma? Just to see if this is contributing to that. Do you have any issues in your lumbar spine? That's another big one, right? A lot of people have back pain. A lot of people have little herniated discs here and there. So if that herniated disc is pushing on that nerve and that's zipping down to your residual limb, is that triggering the phantom limb pain? Marianne says, I drink an electrolyte drink every day, which really cuts down on my phantom pain. Yeah. And that's the other thing is determining what it is you're experiencing, but also what is the trigger, right? So some people, presumably Marianne, will know that if they start to get dehydrated, Florida, that their phantom limb picks up. If they start to get sick, phantom limb picks up, right? Moments of high stress. So after you've determined, okay, is it phantom limb pain? Is it an neuroma? What is it? Then determining what is the trigger to it? What is causing it? And seeing if you can get ahead of it somehow. Doesn't always work, but it's certainly an option to try. Floyd asks, has anyone figured out what it's called when we have the shocker type strong zaps that are much stronger than phantom pain? Floyd, I'll be really honest. We still call it phantom pain. I haven't heard it called anything else unless anybody else has something that they know about that I don't know about. But no, I've heard of some phantom pain that is extremely debilitating, again, something that strong, you want to start looking for a nerve somewhere that's firing. I think probably one of the most painful experiences is nerve pain. So somebody who's having phantom pain that is that debilitating, you definitely start looking for other causes there. Let's see. Andre says, I definitely experience the residual limb pain, and it's usually followed by mild to severe phantom sensation. I can pinpoint certain spots of pain and try to make the TENS unit hit those spots. And again, as you're recovering in those first couple of years after amputation, and you're kind of getting to know your body over again, you're getting to know what's in this residual limb, what's in there, what's going on in there. So hopefully it's not a neuroma. And again, guys, and I do also want to backpedal a little bit and say there's two main kinds of neuromas. There's the neuromas that form on the motor nerves, so nerves that control movement, and neuromas that form on sensory nerves, so the ones that control sensation. So you may have a neuroma, but it may not necessarily be causing fireworks if it's sitting on a motor nerve. Okay. And there are some people walking around with several neuromas and they're not even aware of it. So again, it's just kind of like one of those shotgun approaches. We try to see what's going on in there, if we see anything, and then see if it correlates to the pain that the person is experiencing. When is EmpowerFest? So I know last year's EmpowerFest was at the beginning of June. I don't know when this year's was. Don't know. Anybody have any dates on that? Oh, Francis says the Thumper is the name of her BK. I'm sitting there reading your question, Francis, I'm like, what is she talking about the Thumper? Okay, I got it. Information with the moisturizer. So if you're talking about the VitalFit moisturizer, I'll just put that name down again. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but I will put it down again. So if you type into Google VitalFit SR, just like that, it'll show the name of the company and you can order their product line. So like I said, yeah, they have a daytime moisturizer and a nighttime moisturizer. Love it. Love their products. Love their stuff. And there's a code, the COSI10. Let me just put it up there again one more time. COSI10 code. And I think you get $10 off. Marty asks, have you heard anything about ketamine infusions for phantom limb pain? Yes. Do I know a lot about it? No, but I know that it's out there. I haven't read the latest studies, and that actually kind of reminds me. Marty, can you do me a huge favor, actually, because that's one I've been meaning to do. Guys, I'm going to go ahead and put my email address down. Okay, So for those of you, especially those of you who are new to the show, that is my email address. I answer it. Nobody else answers it. And you can send your questions to me directly there. I've been a little bit behind with summer because I have 4 children at home and I'm trying to soak up as much time with them, but I am getting back to my messages slowly but surely. But if you do have any questions that you want me to answer on the show, go ahead and send it there. Marty, if I could trouble you, please, I'm going to give you an assignment. If you can please send me an email and say, Kosi, look up studies on ketamine and phantom limb pain. Can you please do that for me? Because otherwise it's going to go in and out of my brain by the end of tonight. And that is something I do kind of want to look up. Let's see what else is going on. Bill says mine is coming from my limb and it hits like lightning. Bill, ask your doctor for an ultrasound. Ask him for an ultrasound. And guys, I have several stories. It's not always the case, but I've got enough stories of people who had wounds that weren't healing, pain that they couldn't explain, and nobody thought to put an ultrasound on them. And when finally someone figured out to put an ultrasound, they were able to find an answer. So again, go to your doctor to say, hey, can we just have an ultrasound? That's it. And just ask them to do that. All right. Mitya says, I feel like a piranha was chewing on my big toe. Weirdly, it was related to my digestion. Alcohol makes it worse. High histamines. Isn't that interesting? Lately in recent years, and this is more related, I'm a breast cancer survivor. So in recent years after my cancer diagnosis, I was looking at, lifestyle changes, dietary changes. And I've definitely been exploring the side of functional medicine and nutrition and just learning about how much of our health starts in our gut and all that kind of fun stuff. So it's always very interesting to hear, you hear healing the gut and all that kind of, and guys, by no means am I an expert on anything like that. It's just something that I like to on the side learn about on my own. But I find that to be very interesting right there. Actually, and I'm going to get to another question right now. It says, I'm not sure how to frame this. And this is a conversation I was having with someone about their osseointegration surgeries and things like that. And this person was saying, I'm wondering how clinicians will adjust care and expectations for the patients based on their pre-surgical functional level. And I'm like, this is a very intuitive question. So this person says, I'm a K4. My challenges were about being out of work, being in a wheelchair longer after the original accident, feeling like physical therapy was always having to tell me to take it easy and not helping me stay strong. And I expect that their other patients, other amputee patients, were perhaps not as active. Okay. And they didn't formally assess my functional level. Okay. So I had a brief interview with the surgeon and they scheduled the first surgery. So guys, regardless of whether you are an osseointegration patient or a patient using a traditional socket, this is something that is really important. And this person really picked up on it beautifully. When you go see a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, they should be assessing what you were like prior to your injury. Okay, so prior to your amputation. And it's something that I really dive into a lot with my patients when they come see me for the first time in the clinic is I want to know what they looked like before their amputation. How were they moving around? Were they walking independently? Were they having to use a cane or a walker? Were they doing sports? Were they performing their job, completely independently? Okay. I had one gentleman in the past year come to see me that he used to be an anesthesiologist, right? So I was asking him specifics, how is it for anesthesiology? Are you sitting for several hours at a time during surgery? Are you having to hold equipment for long periods of time? Okay. Are you able to take breaks and have you been able to get back to doing that? Right. So knowing what my patients were like before their amputation, first of all, it tells me what it is I need to start setting goals for. And also it tells me realistically what kind of activity level I can expect from them to get them back to. And oftentimes, and I'll see this more with physical therapists who perhaps don't have that same experience with amputees, is they sometimes may underestimate their amputees, right? They'll underestimate how much the amputee will be able to get back to doing, okay? Especially in someone who is so active. A lot of times I'll have patients that tell me, yeah, I was walking completely normally before my amputation. I had this accident and the PT I went to wouldn't let me get off the walker, or they told me I would never be able to get off the walker. And again, everybody's a little bit different, but it's definitely important for your physical therapist to be assessing this. We even have like an acronym for it. It's the acronym of PLOF. You might even see that in your records, and it stands for prior level of function. We even have an acronym for it, right? And again, this is something that needs to be assessed. And then during your time of evaluation, you assess where you're at that point. And then you continue to do reassessments as you move along. Okay. Now in that, right, and this is where just the fine tuning comes in with your experience as a clinician. Sometimes you'll have some patients that they were incredibly active before and they're gung-ho about being active again, but you got to put the brakes on just a little bit because you don't want them to get injured. So you got to get them just to kind of hold back just a little bit to build that strength and to build that strong foundation before you're really kicking the high gear with some of the higher level activities. And in other people, you might step into the situation and go, you know what, this person could be doing a lot more. They used to do a lot more prior to their amputation, and there's no medical reason why they can't get there with the right therapy. And we need to get them going, right? Mm-hmm. Well, Bill, that sounds really, really cool. I love the fact that you are working with VitalFit. I always enjoyed working with that company. So I'm glad to hear that they are still continuing to develop things. I actually need to reach back. It's been a while since I've talked to my folks over at VitalFit. I need to have a chit chat with them. I haven't talked to them in a while. Okay. All right, this question. Trisha asks, can you speak on mental health when you become an amputee? Let people know it's okay to talk to someone, and that doesn't mean you failed. Trisha, you basically just said it all right there. You said it all right there. Again, I've been doing this show now for 7 years. It'll be 7.5 years. I've been in healthcare for over 30. I've been a PT for 23 years. I am not a psychologist. I am not a psychiatrist. But I've had to learn a lot about psychology during that time. And even during my own time, again, going through breast cancer, you learn a lot about your own psychology during those times, right, guys? But yes, I've said this several times, going through a trauma like cancer, going through a trauma like amputation, that is not a normal thing to go through. It's not a normal thing for the human body to go through. So for our human minds and our human psychology to deal with that is something that we need help with. Some people need the help of peer counseling, peer-to-peer, talking to another amputee. I think, honestly, that's one of the best ways to start understanding what you went through and to be able to kind of come to terms with it and acceptance and moving forward. I just recently posted, I don't usually post a lot of things about me, about cancer on the COSI Talks page, because it's not about my cancer journey. It's about helping amputees. But I recently posted a reel this week of some of my pictures of myself during cancer, and things that I wish amputees knew, right? All amputees knew. And probably the most important lesson is understanding that your life is never going to be the same. Your life is never going to be the same after amputation as it was before, the same way your life is never the same after cancer as it was before. But it doesn't mean that it won't be good. It doesn't mean it won't be good. It's going to look different, and it takes time to get used to that difference, and it takes time to adjust. And you need to have the necessary tools, right, to keep moving forward. But it doesn't mean that it won't be good. Yeah. Guys, what kind of mental health advice would you give a new amputee? Because for me, it's like, I know what I went through, but I want to hear about how you guys would handle it. Let's see. Van Gregory says, EmpowerFest is a wonderful event and you don't have to be a hanger patient to attend. Highly recommend. I agree, Van Gregory. I mean, I had a blast. I went in EmpowerFest. I think it was like 3 or 4 days. It's a little bit hazy for me because literally I was up at 6 in the morning and I didn't go to bed until midnight every night. And it was just go, 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 one activity after the other. And I had so much fun. Ben Gregory, I think I might have to post some of the videos of us working together. I think that might be one of the videos I post next week. Let's see. Bill says Jamie is super cool. Oh, I agree. Jamie is super cool, and that's she's my go-to gal. Jamie says, I noticed that a lot of PTs are trained to help stroke victims, not amputees. I was lucky enough to find a PT who works with amputees, and my mobility improved leaps and bounds. Ask questions. Jamie, I am so glad you brought that up, because one of the projects I'm working on involves trying to bring awareness to hospitals. So right now, if you look at any major hospital system, like look at the hospitals in your area that have like several locations, the majority of them, especially if they have inpatient rehab centers, they will have very well developed spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, and stroke programs. Hands down. They will have incredibly good technology, good clinical resources, fancy programs. They don't have anything for amputees. And this is something that I have been working very hard for the past 7 years to bring this awareness to the hospitals, not only in bringing amputee specific resources to their programs, but in bringing the education to the therapists, to the clinicians, to the nurses that work with amputees. So, Jamie, you hit the nail on the head. Okay. PTs, any one of us can treat a stroke patient. And here's the irony, guys. Here's the kicker, is that when you graduate as a physical therapist, when you take your licensing exam, you're tested on everything, right? It's not that you are specialized the minute you get out of school. No, you're like a nurse in the sense that you theoretically should be able to work with any wide variety of patient pathologies, including amputation, right? But right now, our healthcare system is structured in rehabilitation to cater to traumatic brain and stroke injuries, which again, so good. Do not want to take away from them. We need that. Okay. We need that. And I worked several years with stroke patients and TBI patients and things like that. And actually, here's the other kicker, is a lot of the strategies that I use to treat amputees, I pull from my experience of working with stroke patients. I was just having that conversation today with Jackie on her show. Right? So a lot of these PTs have the knowledge and they don't even realize it, right? But I totally agree. Our hospitals right now, they need to be made aware of the need, right? And guys, I'm going to throw some boring statistics at you, but that's just because I'm a nerd right now. So right now, according to a study done by the Amputee Coalition, there's about 6.5 million amputees living in the United States. And that does not take into account our veterans and people that are covered by TRICARE and our Medicaid unfunded patients. So that number is going to be actually higher, okay? Now, if you look at the population of the United States, amputees only make up about 2% of the whole population of the United States. So it is a kind of tiny part of the population. 6.5 million people is a lot, but it's a tiny part of the population. So a lot of these hospitals are like, well, it's a small part of the population. We don't need to focus our efforts there. But the problem is nobody's focusing their efforts, right? You have a hospital here and there that are standout amputee centers that are really rock stars. But in terms of like hospital systems, like the big hospital chains that see a lot of people, there's no one hospital that is providing the majority of amputee care. And that's a problem. That's a problem. Again, I know I'm getting way into the weeds right now, but this has to do with a lot of projects I'm working on behind the scenes right now to try to kind of hopefully bring more awareness to that. So going back to the mental health, Harsh says, absolutely okay to talk. And that's why we are all in it together. And again, mental health from one person can be completely different from another person. Some people, they like the notion of a support group because they get to hear what other people are experiencing and compare it to themselves and say, okay, well, I'm doing a little bit better, or nope, I could be doing better compared to this person. And it helps them see like, okay, I'm not alone in this. And I think that is a very valuable thing in the healing process. Other people, they're like, nah, I'm not really big on the whole group thing. I'd rather talk one-on-one with people, or I'd rather talk to a counselor, a social worker, a therapist. That's how I work better. And there's so many avenues of addressing mental health, guys. So Floyd says piriformis syndrome might be related to the Shocker-Zapp nerve type pain. Yes, you're absolutely right. And at the end of the day, it's a nerve pain, okay? So piriformis syndrome, okay, and this is what happens. The piriformis is a tiny little muscle in your bum. It's actually located very deep in your bottom, underneath your gluteus muscles, all your glutes. And it's about the size of 2 fingers, okay? So that's the size of your piriformis muscle, okay? Your sciatic nerve is about the size of your finger. So your sciatic nerve is a big, juicy nerve. And in comparison, the piriformis is kind of a small muscle, okay, in proportion to a large nerve. So what happens? Sometimes, Floyd, if a person has weak glutes, right, their glutes are weak, and this is very, very common in amputees, right? The glutes get weak. And then on top of that, when a person starts to learn to use a prosthesis, the glute muscles have to do more work, right, to compensate for the muscles that aren't there anymore. So you've got weak glute muscles, and there's more stress being put on them. Well, that little old piriformis muscle sitting underneath is going to start to try to pick up some of the slack, and it's going to start to kind of wig out. And it's sitting right on top of that sciatic nerve. Okay, so that little old piriformis muscle, it's going to start to spasm. It's going to squeeze, for lack of a better word, that poor little sciatic nerve, and that's going to send some serious shockers down the residual limb. But at the end of the day, it's nerve pain that you're experiencing, right? So remember when I said, Floyd, somebody who's experiencing that level of pain, to me, it screams nerve pain. There's a nerve reason for it, right? There's a nerve somewhere that's getting really hot and bothered. So yes, piriformis syndrome could in fact be one of those things. Okay. And again, it's tracing it back to the root cause. And that's something that, again, a really skilled physical therapist will be able to do, tracing it back to that root cause. Okay, if it is in fact piriformis syndrome, then what is kicking off that piriformis? Is it weakness in the glutes? Is it tightness in that actual little piriformis muscle? Okay, and then what's causing all of that and addressing the root of that problem? Yeah, makes sense? Harsh says, any loss is loss, anything artificial needs time and effort to adopt. Yeah, faith and patience. Amen to that. Happy to do so, Sean. Bill says, look at the hill and not the mountain. I like that. Emily says, give yourself some grace. Linda says, allow yourself to feel and to go through any and all the emotions. Yep. Bill says, I was at the University of, I don't know if that's Miami or Michigan, had a great experience and haven't stopped moving since. Emily says, don't compare yourself to other amputees. Mitya says, I used art, journaling, therapy, and short-term antidepressants. I was in a rural area, so not a lot of peers. I will say that, guys, that sometimes folks who are out in the rural areas, it gets a little bit tougher to do that. I do have to give a shout out though. So companies like Hanger, I know that Amputee Coalition, I'm not as up to this, guy, so correct me if I'm wrong, that they host virtual support groups, and you don't necessarily have to be a Hanger patient in order to join in on one of their support groups. So if you are in a kind of an isolated area, look up on their website. Ben Gregory says, please post away. I've tried numerous times to get into the rehab of our local major hospitals as certified peer visitor to amputees. No go. Why is that, Ben Gregory? Why in the world would your major local hospitals not allow you as a certified peer visitor? I want answers. Like, what? Seriously? Earl says, I would tell them to focus on yourself and what's next with the right people on your team, and you'll get there, and don't go down the rabbit hole of prosthetic knees and all of its components. Yes, at that point, Earl, they need to come to the COSI Talk show so that I will teach them all about the nuts and bolts, literally, about prosthetic feet and prosthetic knees. So yes, the big picture, that's the easy stuff, right? The prosthetic knees and understanding all of that, that's the easy stuff. It's kind of wrapping your head around how your life is going to look like moving forward, right? Let's see. Great comments here, guys, and thank you for sharing. Bill says Michigan. Okay. AC does have really good resources. Oh, and says Emily says AC Amputee Coalition has a Zoom meeting each Thursday night. There you go, guys. Okay, and I think That's it. We good. We did all the questions. Holy cow. I'm like making sure. I'm like, because we did a lot of talking tonight. Okay. Awesome, guys. I'm like, woohoo. Lots of great questions. Guys, I will say this again, and this is something I am really trying to push hard because I really love using this as a way to communicate with all of you. If you have not already done so, I would love to ask if you guys could please sign up for my texting service. I do not send spam. I don't clog up your text messages. It's basically for me to send you the links when I go live, because I know sometimes it's easier for you all to find me when I send you the direct link. And also it's a way for you guys to be able to text me directly. You can do it by email, but some people, it's just easier to do it through texting. Not to mention when I have like a special sponsored show or anything like that, I send the giveaway information there and you get first dibs on that. So guys, if you haven't already done so, I would really appreciate if you could just take a couple of minutes. You text COSI Talks, all one word in all caps, to that number that I just posted there. So I would really appreciate it. As the Earl says, Hanger, introduce me to your show straight away. Oh my gosh, I really love that. Earl, if there's a particular person who introduced you to my show, I would love to know their name so that I could give them a thank you. Happy 4th, guys. Happy 4th on our nation's birthday. So we got a lot going on in our world and in our country today, but I still think it's important to celebrate this beautiful country that we live in. It is not perfect, but it is our beautiful country. All right, guys, as always, thank you for letting me be a part of your lives this evening. Have a happy and safe 4th of July with your loved ones, and make sure to have some fun. And I will see you guys next Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel. Bye, guys. God bless.